Before Saturday's SEC Championship, we got to chat with the SEC Nation crew and get their thoughts leading into number 1 Georgia taking on number 14 LSU at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Here's Roman Harper, Tim Tebow, and Laura Rutledge on this matchup, including a hot take right off the bat by Harper.
They know what they're doing in the secondary. And the linebacker, Jamon Dumas
Johnson.
Yes, oh my gosh.
It's a mouthful.
It is. Do you go by anything else like JD's?
They call him Pop.
Okay, all right, yeah. I'm going to start calling him Pop. Yeah, I'm like, dude, it's just about it out. So I think he's actually, and I'll say it in front of everybody, he's better than Nakobe Dean. And not just, and as far as the NFL prospect, he's bigger. The dude has just as much speed, and if you watch this guy, he's flying around sideline to sideline, making every single play. And I love Nakobe Dean, and I say this with all due respect, he's just better. He's bigger, he makes more plays, and he's an outstanding NFL prospect in due time. But right now, those are the things that really just jump off the tape to me. And they also got a couple young guys up front that have continued to play and have gotten better over the season. And so Georgia's defense, what am I going to say? Like Kirby talks about it, you hear him in the locker room. Physical football travels. And when you watch Georgia play, they hit people with body shots, and they don't want to see Georgia in the fourth quarter because the way they play and the way they hit you, and it's a constant wave, and it's a never-ending wave of just relentlessness, the way they play physical football, the way they're able to take away what you like to do. They're smart, they're physical, and they're tough. And that's the type of brand of football that I love. And that, if my son was of age right now, I would send him to Georgia because, I know what he's going to get, and I know what they're teaching him, and those are the things that matters, and that's what wins.
Georgia's saying all.
Now, I say that, but, Alabama, too. It's still his decision.
I'm assuming you watch a guy like Stetson Bennett differently than we do. What do you notice that maybe I wouldn't? When you see a guy like Bennett doing what he's done for Georgia now for the last 2 years, what do you see?
Well, I think for so long he was just underrated, and people would throw around just game manager, and I'm sure that probably just really irritates him. And I think he's so much more than that. I think he's someone that brings a lot of energy and swagger and moxie to it. And I think sometimes because their style of play, he also doesn't put up some of the stats that other offenses would. And I think it's important to understand that based on your scheme, based on the time of possession, how they play, stats don't always tell the full story, right? And so it's how do you best manage that offense? And I think he does a really good job, I would say. In a few games, you could see him maybe trying to create some big plays when he didn't necessarily have to. But I think that's the human element of someone that's trying to go out there and let it rip. But I think, look at him in so many of the big games. He's really stepped up and played some of his best and some of the best moments, and isn't that what you want out of quarterback? So he's someone that's earned a lot of respect from me and a lot of people, and he's just not someone that I would underestimate in a situation like this.
Tim, how much of an X factor can Georgia's tight ends be? It's just such a unique group with Darnell Washington, Brock Bowers, and those guys.
Yeah, gosh, I don't think they're going to be a surprise to anyone, because if LSU hasn't been preparing for them, then you miss some of the most talented guys in the country, and I don't know if anybody's going to miss Darnell Washington. How big he is. It's a matchup nightmare. Whether they make a bunch of catches or not, that's not the only thing that they're a mismatch in. It's formations. It's that they can go to the huddle and you can be 2 tight ends, but then they can go to the line of scrimmage and you can be an empty formation, and it's a nightmare for a defense. What personnel do you call? Are we treating them as base? Are you treating Darnell as an offensive lineman? Are we going to go big personnel? Then you can also treat it as nickel, and I think that's a nightmare. How do you match up against it? And I think so. No matter how many catches they have, which I'm sure they'll be targeted quite a bit, but it's just being able to get the right personnel and the right placement. And then how do you treat Brock? Do you treat him as a receiver? Do you treat him as a tight end? That's just a nightmare that teams have to have great communication. You have to be able to understand what personnel, and I think already going into it, that's kind of an advantage they have of when you got 2 tight ends that are so versatile. And I think it's something that Georgia's done a really good job of utilizing.
So I think for Georgia, it's just more of the same. They've been so solid, and obviously people talk about sometimes the lack of explosive plays for them and things like that, and just maybe having more success in the red zone. But I think we're nitpicking a team that is obviously deserving of the number 1 ranking. So it's staying the course, which is hard to do, especially against an opponent like LSU. For LSU, I think takeaways, maybe even some trick plays, some things to catch Georgia off guard, which is going to be hard to do because not much catches them off guard. They're so well coached, they're so disciplined, they're so prepared for these big moments. And along those lines, for LSU, my other key would be just don't get too out of whack because of the moment. I mean, this is huge, and we all know this having covered this game, but it's one of these games that feels almost like a college football playoff game no matter what the implications are. And so I think the stage could be really big, and LSU needs to not get too wrapped up in that for sure. I think it starts with Kirby Smart, and we were saying this last week on SEC Nation, like, we're not giving Kirby Smart enough credit. All the conversation's been around Saban and Alabama's not in the playoff and all this, and it's like Kirby Smart's quietly over here becoming the dominant force from a coaching standpoint in the country, but also in the SEC. And it's not to diminish anything that Saban and Alabama's done and some of these other coaches, but we need to give some more credit to Kirby and what he's built. I think it's more the consistency. I mean, how many of us said, well, Georgia will be okay this year, but they lost all those players to the draft. And I was in the room when they were all drafted, and I'm looking around thinking every single Georgia player has been drafted. What are they going to even look like this year? And then they have found ways to just have success that I think goes back to not only being a team that's bought in, but also the coaching. So I think it's the consistency and maintaining of success that really deserves a ton of credit this year.